Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
Well, we all started our positions at our summer camp programs.
Great. I
It's
wanted to
been
hear about that.
exhausting. It's been exhausting.
Very exhausting.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a young person's game to chase kids, isn't it?
The problem has been buses,
Well, of
transportation.
course.
Hey,
Duh.
Yeah. The first
good,
day,
gracious.
the first day I was at the school till 6,
Yep.
answering phone calls about buses.
And everybody's so polite when they call. That's the best part.
Oh yeah.
Butter wouldn't melt in their mouth. They're so happy about everything.
Oh yeah. But other than the buses, everything else has been great.
Yeah.
So
Now,
buses,
are y'all having to run the routes and put them together because it like in the old days before Tim's came along, because you're actually doing multiple districts for summer school where
Right.
you consolidate, you're having to run the routes? Yeah. Wanda said she's having trouble.
at my school, our site coordinator had our lead bus driver do the routes. I was fortunate to not have to do that.
Yeah.
I know this is being recorded, so off the record, Heather, you suck.
Do what now?
Did it come through?
I heard what you said.
Okay.
I don't think I did.
Okay, good.
What I mean is, remembering that I rarely can hear. Well, but I will say this.
Heather knows I love her.
So, back in the olden days, we used to, as I told you, that's kind of, this kind of an old school model. When I was in Rutherford, which is what, 2 counties over to the west of y'all, you couldn't get hired in between your year as an intern and that summer they would assign you a summer school principal. And if you could pull that off, then you get an AP job. And so I did summer school. No, and then you weren't the lead, but then they made you do it again. Go from assistant principal to principal. They made you do summer school again. And back in the old days before Tim's, and of course y'all are back to that same thing where you have to map them out, but we mapped them out ourselves. And but I still remember that as being a valuable experience, in that I saw where the kids came from, and I began to understand more about them and their neighborhoods and their communities. I also understood, if I had an issue later on, maybe I could solve some of it myself. So I did find value in it, but now obviously buses are terrible. But I never will forget, I went to Ellenboro and I was principal out in the 7th and 8th grade building. And of course, the kids came on the same buses for the elementary, and we shared the buses and the whole deal. When the bus lot cleared the first day of school, my first year there was a little kid there, just, it was just bellowing. It was probably I don't know, first grader, kindergarten. I think it was kindergarten. I think it was maybe. But anyway, had been left over, hadn't gotten on the right bus. His brother hadn't got him. And so he was there. Nobody knew where he was or what he's supposed to do. One of the teacher assistants said, I think I know what community he might live in. So we got in my truck and off we went, and we were driving around and kind of came to the end of the line. And I said, let me turn around in this driveway, and we'll go back the other way and see if he recognizes where he lives. And I pulled up in the driveway. He said, this is where I live. I mean, what are the odds that the driveway I picked to turn around in was the house where he lived? But the point of that story is we knew probably what community he was from, and we knew some things about what was going on. And I was just learning the communities at that time because it was my first year there. But there's not much better way to learn your communities than working bus routes, and also your parents. And if you can handle those irate parents, it's good practice for you. Now, you wouldn't want to do it on a daily basis, but there is some value in it, and there is some learning there. It's good.
I have a question. I've got the parents, or I'm working on that. I think I'm about 42% there. I am nowhere with Presbyterian church directors. Do you have any advice in that department?
Presbyterian church directors.
Yeah, it's like daycare directors or
those people that won't conform to what you tell them to do, won't have the kids out there, nobody will be there to meet them, those kinds of issues. Well, do you want a solution for you or a solution for me? A solution for you.
Really, I think the biggest thing is I think it surprised me that, I was trying to make a solution for the kid, and it seemed like the person on the other end of the line was trying to make it just easier for them, themselves.
Well, that's what I mean. And so
yeah,
at some point you need some political skill dealing with people like that who think that your job is to make their job easier, and that they're making money off of these folks, and that you should that your job is to help them make money and to things to be easier. So solution for you is to probably go over and visit with them. The solution for me would be is I drive by and not pick the kids up the next morning. That would be the solution for me. And I would break them down until they came and called me and begged me for my service. That's what I would do. But back in the day, you could do things like that. And again, but you're on the way up. You want to try to work with these people, but now the truth of the matter is they're paying in behind. And going and meeting with them might not work. But if going and meeting with them didn't work, the next thing I'd do is I'd drive by the next day. I'd tell the driver, don't stop. And I will, I will loosen you up one way or the other. But now I'd let people in charge know that this person is being a problem. This is my solution. Do you have an alternative solution? And we would go from there. But your first thought ought to be to try to collaborate with people if you can. If not, then you have to do what you have to do. And so that's pretty much a good idea. I want to start us out tonight. Welcome. I want to remind everybody that the task 1 was due this past Sunday. I think we've got a couple that haven't turned that in. So I need your task 1 soon. And I want to talk to you about task 2. We'll start on that before we debrief on last week's case study. So let's talk about task 2. The only way that you can get task 2 wrong, well, there's 2 ways you can get task 2 wrong. You forget to take the labels off from the APTEL. Remember, it's APTEL, task 1, 2, and 3. You forget to take the labels off, the tasks, the prompts, and or you don't include the actual graphic organizer of the professional growth plan. So let me share my screen. And I have pulled up an APTEL at random. So here it is. And so this is the goodie here. This is what we're looking for, is this graphic organizer of the proposed plan. This is what we're looking for. We're looking for this piece right here. Again, we're going to stop when we get to task 4. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this cover off all these things, task description. We're going to start under OMA task 1, task 2, with background, school information, and community. That's what we're going to start with. And then when we get to that second bullet under OMA task 2, that's going to be when we get right here to, let's see, what's it? The literature review goes under the second bullet, and then the third bullet is the beginning of 2, and the 4th bullet is your action plan. So you can figure it out where it all goes, but make sure you take these task and prompt descriptions from the AppTel out and fit it where it goes. And do not forget to include the graphic organizer in the end of task 3, the graphic organizer for your professional growth plan. Now, if you are one of those folks who put the graphic organizer, the summary of your professional growth plan in the AppTel, if you put it in your appendices, take it out and put it at the end of task 3 of the AppTel, and then move it over. Don't make me have to read through this and I get to the end to read your plan and your plan's not there. I will not be a happy camper. This is pretty simple. This is less than an hour, and we can move on to task 3, but don't get it wrong. Don't make me have to read stuff 2 or 3 times. So that's enough on that. Now let's talk about task 3. A question came in last night, in last night's group. And they're a good group. Savannah met with us a couple of weeks ago. They're a good group. And a question came in from them last night, and I thought, boy, this is a really good question, and this was most appropriate for y'all. The question came in, I've been assigned to direct a summer program. Sound familiar? And I had to do a master schedule, or I'm having to do a master schedule. Could I use that one? What a great idea. What a great idea. But as they pointed out, school's already closed and we've already done the master schedule at the regular school. Just work your way through the process. Start with your federal programs, then your state law on scheduling, length of class time, number of days, all that stuff, duty free, planning period, all those things. Then move to your local board policy on like minutes of reading or math or whatever the policy is for summer school. And then look at your performance data, and then you would look at teacher input. And if you can do it from your summer program, that's great. If you're at an elementary school, you should do the whole thing. If you're like at a high school, you should do like the CTE department or the history department. Make it something manageable. But what I'm most interested in is seeing that the process, the rationale for how scheduling goes, that we always start with our federal programs. Why do we start with federal programs? Because they're the most restricted. We know that. When we start talking about the Leandro case here in a few minutes, when we talk about our next case study that's due next week, we're going to talk about, why you can't be moving funds around. And the first thing we're going to say is, we know that in federal programs, the money follows the kids by name. What do you have to do every month in your exceptional children's program? What's that thing called? You have to, when you go in there and you count them, it's called a head count, right? You have to do that. Can you just tell them what the number that you have? No. What do you have to tell them? You have to tell them the names, because the money comes to the individual kid. And so for that reason, our federal programs are the most restricted. It's a contract with parents and advocacy groups in terms of what they get. So we have to make sure we accommodate all of those first. Then comes all of our state laws, and it's right there. I've uploaded it for you. How many days, length of the day, how much planning time, all that stuff, when the calendar can start. Now, the local generally decides it's going to be a 4x4 or a AB day or a 7-period day. How many minutes for high school and elementary school, how many minutes of reading, how many minutes of math. Who knows how many minutes of reading that kids get in Gaston County every day in elementary school?
It's 120 minutes of literacy is the requirement.
That is correct. Why did it go from 90 to 120?
I've always known it to be 120 personally.
Do what?
It's always been 120 since I started.
The scores
but
are low.
Gaston County, so I don't know.
All right, so it was 90 forever. all across the state. And then what did the state say? Said the scores are low. Everybody's got to adopt reading 3D. And when we did that, what did we have to do? We had to move from 90 to 120. That doesn't sound like a big deal, does it? Except it's June 11th and everybody's going home on June 15th and we've already scheduled the school for 90 minutes. How big a deal is it to move from 90 to 120? Does that affect other classes, length of them? Does it affect your specials? You know, your music, your art, all those things. And so those are the kinds of things you need to know is what is the county's expectation for numbers of minutes of this, numbers of minutes of that? How often do I get the band teacher? How often do I get the music teacher? How often do I get the art teacher? Do we have a room or do we have art on a cart? Does that matter in the scheduling? Well, of course it does. You know, all those kinds of things. That's your locals. That's the stuff you got to factor in. Now, quite honestly, when you get to be principal, they'll send you it'll be an email, a double secret email, and they'll have a document attached, and it will say non-negotiables for scheduling. And you have to follow that. I've got a few of those double secret documents. I've got one from Guilford County. It says that you will do these things. We're going to have AB day. We're going to have a 7-period day. It has the non-negotiables. We're going to have this many minutes of math, this many, you're going to get this many special. It lays all that stuff out for you. That's got to factor in. Then your performance data. What in the world does EVOS have to do with schedule? Somebody tell me.
Shows you the strengths of people in your building.
Mm-hmm. I know I've told you the story. I inherited a football coach who was the AP European teacher, except he never had a student to pass the AP exam, never had a student to make a 3, 4, or a 5. Never, not one. 0, 0 for.
Dr. Lamb, I had freshmen pass the AP World exam during the COVID year. That amazes me.
You did what?
I had freshmen take AP World.
Yeah.
And I had them pass, and that was during COVID.
Yeah.
So, I mean, come on.
Well,
that's a hard test.
If you look at historical data on AP, of other than fine arts exam, European AP has the highest pass rate because it has the most compact curriculum in terms of the time period that it starts and ends is so finite, so small that and the material is so relevant that it's easily has the easiest highest pass rate. Now I'm not talking about passing with a 5 out of 5. I'm talking about with 3 out of 5. He had taught it for several semesters and never had a student to pass. And so that's performance data. What should I do? Should I keep on having him do that in order to make him happy so he gets the best kids and continues to coach football? He wasn't much of a football coach either. But if he'd have been the best one in the state, it wouldn't have mattered. We have to look at that performance data. Now that gets into some other issues. Who are you going to replace him with? I mean, the rest of that bunch I had wasn't world beaters either. Wasn't hard to be captain of a lifeboat. I mean, I didn't have very many good ones. So I had a beginner. I hired her in August. December, I put her in there, 2nd semester. She said, it's not about, he said, I just got here. I hadn't served my time. Senior, it's not about time, it's about talent. If you show up sober and clean clothes, you got him beat. I mean, you can't do worse unless you set the building on fire or wet your pants or both. You can't do worse than him. He's never had anybody to pass. Doggone, she didn't have, she was in the 90-something. I think she had all but one of hers pass. They were a good group. I mean, we had some good kids. She had all but one to pass. And I was like, he didn't ever have any. That's what we're talking about. Who teaches what, where, when, and why. EVOS can, it's pretty easy in the high school to do that because you got the end of course exam. It's not as easy in some of the elementary grades, and that's what that EVOS data tells us. But it also tells us what kind of kids teachers are good teaching as well. I mean, some teachers are good with the very top kids. I've told you my wife, was state AG certified, curriculum instruction specialist, all that, taught at an IB school, all those little kids with glasses so thick, you couldn't get them around sunlight. It's all the paper on fire. But everybody can't teach them. Everybody can't get growth out of it. It's not as easy as people think it is. Their parents are demanding and the kids are sometimes difficult to get to focus. They're so smart. Everybody can't do that. On the other end, everybody can't work with at-risk kids either. And so EVOS can tell you those kinds of things. What teachers get the best results out of which kids. And that's just self-inflicted idiocy if you don't do that, because again, we got to be champions for kids. We all know that, but our overarching philosophy here is, what do they do at Jones Sausage? They make sausage. What do we do in school? We teach kids. And if you don't think achievement doesn't matter, you're in the wrong line of work. We're trying to increase student achievement. That's what our job is as school administrators. So I know it may not be politically popular for you to put, to change who teaches what, and that the department chair doesn't automatically get to teach honors or AP or the best kids. They may not do the best job with. That's the kind of things that you got to be looking at, and you have to make those hard decisions. And then teacher input comes last. So what we're looking for in this, literally you should breeze right through OMA task 2 in about an hour. And so this week you should get to task 3. Make sure that whatever school, or if you're doing the summer school, that the notion here is we're going right down the line. We've done an audit of our federal programs. We know what they're supposed to get. We should know what they are getting. Is there something there that needs to be fixed? Is there something for, in summer school, is there something there? Is there something in our complying with the state in terms of the legal requirements? Is there something that we could do from the county perspective in terms of do a better schedule, maybe not do a split lunch? Something like that. I mean, what could we do? Maybe put some time in before or after, those 0 periods where we have kids, we're working with kids. What can we do to the local part of the schedule? And then looking at our data, who does the best job with which kids? And then teacher input. Now, people say, well, what does teacher input mean? Well, mostly I would say, and it happens even beyond that, but mostly I would say in elementary school, what kids don't need to be together. That when you put them together, you got the fire department on speed dial because they're about to set the building on fire every day. That's who we're talking about. Don't put those kids together. Now, I saw a couple smiles fleet across lips. You elementary teachers know what I'm talking about. And if you put them together, you know what's going to be. So again, that's self-inflicted. So that's what we're talking about. So that's what we're looking for in task 3 of the OMA. You ought to hit that this week. This is our 5th class already. Yeah, you got to pull the fire alarm today to start the first fire drill. Well, good for you. We'll get you we'll get you a little fireman's hat and let you ride the truck. It'll be good. This is week 5 already. So we ought to knock out, sometimes it takes a couple of weeks to knock out task 3. I've told you that. It's not every task doesn't take, it doesn't take the same amount of time. It takes 2 weeks and getting after it pretty hard to get task 1. Task 2 is just a few minutes. Task 3 may take you a couple of weeks as well. And then, of course, it takes a week to write the last one. You'll write your competencies. You'll write 12 of those. It takes about a week to do that. So 3 weeks, that puts us right at 8 weeks, folks. Don't come up to the end. Don't do that to me. Because I'll have, I won't suffer in silence. I'll come over on Saturday, pull all your nose hairs out if you don't get your work in this summer. So make sure that you do that. Now, I had a question today to that end. Dr. Balknight has decided that she's not going to teach y'all this fall, but she has another person who I'm in the process of working with now. I won't announce that because they haven't been officially hired by Gardner Webb yet, but it will happen. But now in the spring, you will have Dr. Stone. He works on Tuesdays at 6. He likes to go at 6 o'clock. He's old. He eats dinner early. Make sure you tell him I said that. And so he eats about 4 o'clock, so he's ready to roll by 6. And so he's ate his supper and had a nap, so he normally gets up and starts about 6 o'clock. So that is the plan, is y'all will finish in the spring and I will write up. What are y'all doing y'all had any Saturdays yet this summer? I wrote them a plan of what I want them to do with y'all. If y'all got any, do y'all have one scheduled?
No Saturdays, I don't think, in the summer.
Okay, well, I wrote them a plan. They talked about they wanted to do some things, so I sat down and wrote them a plan of what I wanted them to support y'all with this summer, but that's okay. We're good. We got you coming and going to and froing a lot this summer already. I think when they looked at the activities y'all were doing, I think they said we can't, there's no need for us to meet. They're going to be coming out, interviewing people and doing all that. So I think that was their decision when they saw the list of things y'all were going to be doing. I did have a couple of suggestions, but they were based on helping y'all with the things that we're doing now. So I think that's it, but I think y'all will probably start meeting again on Saturdays. All right, so questions for me on OMA Task 2 or Task 3. Now would be your time. All right, so let's talk about the case study last week. Let's debrief on that. Tell me what you learned last week.
Know the law.
Know the law. It's kind of pretty simple, isn't it? Now, we can support you and when I say we, folks in the central office can support you if you have followed the law, even if it might not be what everybody wanted to hear. One of the things that I want to use the correct term here. I'm going to say neophyte. That means early on in your career. One of the things that neophyte administrators have hesitancy about is picking up the phone and giving somebody at the central office bad news, or picking up the phone and calling the police. They're afraid about the negative PR. But folks, you don't want to be in court, just like when we get to the weekly one that has the field trip in it. Don't call the central office first, call the law, call 911. You don't want to be in court explaining why you hesitated. And then you would be doubly stupid if you said something like that. Well, I didn't see if anybody was hurt. And then they're going to ask you where you got your medical degree. It's only going to get worse from there. So the notion here is you must follow the law. I don't care if it's popular or if it's going to cause you a PR issue or whatever. You got to follow the law. You got to do the right thing always. There's never anybody that can give you permission to break the law. You got to follow the law. You can't. And one of the things that you learn in law school is intent. It's hard you can't really judge somebody's intent. One of the things I always say is it didn't matter if you couldn't or wouldn't, you didn't. You couldn't do it, you weren't capable or weren't able or competent to do it, or you just knew you were supposed to or could, but you just decided you wouldn't. That doesn't matter. All that matters is you didn't. That's all that matters. You didn't. And so we can't judge the teacher's intent. It's pretty clear, but it's not a mistake. It's not she didn't know the grading policy. There's 9 steps that you have to take before you can exclude a kid for the year. She didn't take any of them. She knew you couldn't make a homework assignment count for more than half the yearly grade. You can't even count the exam, but the state exam, but for 20%. This is not accidental. It's not incidental. When somebody does something illegal, and please don't say we'll support them privately and publicly, but then we'll tell them not to privately. You can't do things like that. So I know it's in your code of conduct, but I like how it's summarized in CMS's code of conduct. So let me share this with you. Here are the 9 steps that you have to take before you can remove a kid like Bobby was removed. So let me share my screen. I can do that. And Wood, thank you for allowing me to use your app, Tel. I meant to ask you, but I didn't get around to it.
Not a problem. You have permission to do whatever.
Yeah. Thank you. So what am I looking for here?
Dr. Lamb, I did have a question while you're pulling that up. We had to remove a student from summer camp.
Yeah.
And I was not directly involved with that, so I don't have all the pieces for that. Would that not fall under this? Or not necessarily?
No, not a summer camp.
Okay, it's the camp. Okay.
Not a summer camp. Now, there should be some due process to it, though. There should be some due process to it, but it wouldn't be as involved as this. You should be able to have the kid should be able to go in and give his side of the story, and you need to collect witness statements in writing, and you should be able to say this is why the kid, for disciplinary purposes, was removed from the camp. But yeah, you need to do that piece, but that's not an expulsion of a regular educational placement. That's a summer camp placement. But yeah,
Okay.
you'd need at the local level to have done process like you would a discipline case. So here are the things that you would have to do if you were going to do to Bobby what the teacher did. Number 1, this is 9 things. 9. Notice of long-term suspension, discipline team meeting, disciplinary reassignment, preliminary decision to impose long-term, due process hearing, appeal of long-term, board hearing, and then the last 2, as I told you, a mediation and then a civil court case. 9 things have to happen before you can exclude Bobby for a year. How many of these things happened for Bobby? That would be none. That would be 0. You know, that therein lies your problem. This is what you have to do. Now you have a similar, it's not laid out quite as quickly and easily as the one in CMS's handbook because we had to use it all the time. I might have wrote that one a few years back. I don't remember. Maybe it was somebody else. But looking at where are we here? Gaston County Code of Conduct looks much like the Code of Conduct for CMS, and it lists all the different infractions that you can commit, and it has the consequences. You'll notice CMS uses a tier system. Gaston uses a level system, what grade level you're in system. It's immaterial. So this would be what would, I'm going to close this right quick so y'all can't read. All right. That code of conduct that lays out the due process steps, is that substantive or is that procedural?
That is substantive. That's what it is.
Right. That is substantive. That's the substance. That's what they're supposed to get. Procedure is, did you follow that or not? See, that's always the issue with due process. Your district has already laid all this stuff out. They've already laid out the daily schedule. They've already laid out the grading scale. They've already laid out the disciplinary track. They've set the minimum and maximum. They've said if you do this, you get. They've done all that stuff. That's the substance. The trick is, did you follow that in your procedure? And again, not only did the teacher violate state policy on grading, local policy, federal law on a zero tolerance expulsion, that federal is she never followed any of those 9 steps to move Bobby out of school. That's the trifecta. But in the end, did we follow all these things that we were supposed to do, the procedure? We didn't do any. That should have been your first clue. Well, where's Bobby's due process here? Your first thought shouldn't have been, well, somebody didn't tell that teacher about grading. Well, of course, everybody told that teacher about grading. But an overarching piece of that is adults do bad things. That's why prisons are full. Adults do bad things. It's your job to correct those bad things that they do. And it's all and it's not they just didn't know or they missing. No, sometimes people intentionally do bad things. And again, we go back to intent. I don't know if she couldn't or wouldn't. I know what she did. That's the thing here. We don't have to try to figure out her intent. Well, maybe Bobby was a turd. Okay, Bobby was a turd, but that still doesn't excuse what she did. And we have to understand we're changing our lens from working with children every day to working with adults every day. And we can have some compassion, but not when it comes to breaking the law. We can have some leniency. We can work with folks, but not when it comes to breaking the law, because if you go along with it, you're now involved in a conspiracy with them. Can't do that. You can't go along with law breaking. It won't go well for you. It will not go well for you. And so that's the takeaway from last week is don't know if she could or couldn't or wouldn't. What we know is she did. We don't have to know what her intent was. She broke the law and we have to fix it. And again, you folks are a lot kinder hearted than me. Y'all, when I'll put her on an action plan, that would be the least that I would do. But for me, she'd have to go. She would have to go. Because she did the most heinous thing that you can do to a child without either sexually or physically abusing them. Most you can do to a child is take away their educational rights for a whole year. That's the most you can do. She attempted that over a homework assignment. Jeez. What you have to wonder about is what if Bobby had cheated on a test? What would she have done to him then? All that was left was to shoot poor old Bobby. So that's our takeaway. Now let's talk about this coming week. You should already be collaborating on your second case study. Again, the heart of the case study is Leandra. And so I have not pulled the document up specifically. Now, of course, waiting, it won't pull up because I want to show you where it is. I want to make sure that I get this every year. I don't know where that was. I didn't see that. Here's where it is. So when we go into our Blackboard shell and we go to case study 2, when you read the case, right here are the directions. Down at the bottom, it says Leandro, Duke Law. Everybody see that? You click on that button. And this is the most marvelous thing from Duke's Law School. They publish these. They're little one-sheeters on big cases. Look at that. They summarize the whole thing for you in one sheet. It's wonderful. And it gives you the background. In 94, a lawsuit was filed against the state of North Carolina from 4 low wealth districts: Cumberland, Vance, Robinson, and Halifax and Hope. That would be 5. Cumberland wasn't considered low wealth. That's another story. All right. And so what they were trying to do was get the state to modify how they allot money to districts per pupil. All right. So somebody remind me. I'm going to stop my share briefly here. Somebody remind me. Y'all know why I had to come out. I can't see but two of you when I'm sharing. Remind me how the state sends money to districts per pupil.
Attendance.
Now, based on how many attend, right? All right. Did they send all 8,000 the first week of school? No. They divided into 10 installments, but it's due after the first month, after the second, after the third, so forth till after the 10th. You spend money on hand, your fund balance as a district for the first month, and then they reimburse you. But they subtract attendance. So again, if you have 95% attendance, they'll send $760. Where'd I get $760? Well, 8,000 divided by 10 is 800, and 5% off of that's 40. So that's $760 per pupil. They send at the end of the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, and 10th. That's the way they send that money. Regardless. Now, but we're going to round that back up to the original 8,000. We're just going to use that as a round number. They send every kid, they send $8,000 for the course of the year to Gaston County schools for every one of the kids that you have that are in attendance. They send $8,000. What about Robinson County schools? How much do they spend them? Send them $8,000. What about Buncombe County? $8,000. What about Mecklenburg County? $8,000. So the lawsuit, the Leandro lawsuit was, wait a minute. It starts out equal, doesn't it? Everybody gets 8. It starts out equal, but it doesn't end equal. Why doesn't it end equal?
Attendance is the absences are higher.
No, well, yeah, absences are higher. That's true. But again, we're going back to the original 8,000. Let's take attendance out of it. Everybody gets 8, whether you're in Mecklenburg or Gaston or Vance or Hope. Everybody gets 8,000. How does it get, forget about attendance for a second. How does it get unequal in the end? Real simple. Local money. Is it against the rules for local county commissioners to add more money to the school budget? That would be no. Where do they get that money from? They get it from local business taxes and property taxes. The heart of the Leandro case was they were fighting this flat grant system of funding from the state that gave everybody a flat amount. Their argument was, yeah, we start out with 8, but in the end, Mecklenburg ends up with 12,000 spent on every one of theirs. We don't have the money locally to add to that local budget other than because we are strapped by what? What happened in 1966? What did the state do in North Carolina? What did they exit in 1966? Funding for school facilities. Capital. What did the state say in 1966? If you want to build a school building, what do you have to do? Gaston County Schools. You have to get an appropriation from your commissioners of local tax money or let a bond or both. The state will no longer send you money or loan you money or provide you money to either build or upkeep your buildings. So in the lower wealth districts, where are they spending all of their local property tax revenue? That's business and residential. What are they spending it on? Trying to keep their buildings up. Can they buy extra teachers? Can they put extra money in schools? That would be no. So at the time of the lawsuit, I'm going to use 8,000 again as a round number. Hope County, Robinson County were getting 8 from the state. Mecklenburg was getting 8 from the state, but they were adding 4 more to it. And so the average amount spent per pupil in Mecklenburg was $12,000, and it was $8,000 in Hope. And what the argument of the plaintiffs is that's not equal. We want a system of state funding that says Hope gets 10 Where did they get the 2 to go from 8 to 10? We're going to take that from Mecklenburg. So they're going to start out at 6. Hope starts at 10. And when Mecklenburg adds the 4,000 local back, guess what? Now we're back to 10 for each. It's called district power equalizing with a recapture provision, or Robin Hood. We take from the rich and give to the poor. That's what Leandro wanted. They wanted it to be equal in the end, not in the beginning. That was the whole notion. That when we start with 8,000 each, wealthy districts can add more to that, and we end up with a big disparity. And so it kicked around in the courts for 3 years. Full disclosure, I was on the group from Institute of Government, Chapel Hill, that was on the side of the plaintiffs. And after 3 years, we felt really good. But when the case was returned, this was what was held. Now you got to read this part carefully. Held is mean what they decide. So we go back to our view. So this is what was held. Neither school districts nor counties have any constitutional right to equal funding. But Dale, you said they started out with equal. What they were asking for was at the end, in the end, for it to be equal, for the state to regulate the amount of money, give poorer counties more and wealthier counties less, so at the end they would both have the same. And the court found that a unanimous court stated that neither school districts nor counties have any constitutional right to equal funding. But they went on to rule that they have a constitutional right to receive a sound basic education. Well, we already knew that. That came in 1984, 13 years prior to that. And so what that means is, as long the state gets to decide how much that costs. They say it costs $8,000, that's what you get. Now they can't say that it costs $8,000 and give you 6, but they wouldn't do that anyway. If all they had to if all they had was 6,000 per pupil, they'd say that's all it costs to provide a basic education, because they get to decide that. Of equal significance, the Supreme Court ruled that the state of North Carolina, that would be the General Assembly, not local school district, has the ultimate constitutional obligation to actively safeguard and successfully deliver every child's Leandro right, no exception, no excuse. What that means is, can a local district manipulate the money? Can the local district move federal money from the kids it's intended to other kids? Is that allowable? How does federal money come? It comes by kid, doesn't it? You know, I'm an EC kid. It comes from me. If you know, can you take it from me and give it to Wood over at this other school? No. So you can't move federal money. All right. What about state money? Can you move state money? No. You just read it said that you can't do that. What about local money? Can you move local money? It said neither the state nor the local, the county, the commissioners can't do that. So if you can't move federal money, if you can't move state money that's intended, that's earmarked for this kid at this school over here, and you can't move local money, can you develop, as this superintendent did in this case, can you develop a new funding formula where you take money from one side of town and give it to the other? Can you do that? You know, well, we got these high-risk kids over here, they need more. But what about the kids over here? Do you think their parents are going to be silent? What are those parents going to do? They're going to burn the house down. Literally, not figuratively. So just before the pandemic, there was kind of a test case for this. You say, well, Dale, this thing's been going on for 30 years. What are you talking about? A test case. Well, and we'll talk about Wested and the new judge and the money, but When Leandro was decided, what did we get? What did the state announce at the same time that they were going to do to try to get more money to low wealth districts? What did the state announce that they were going to allow to try to get more money to low wealth districts? What was it?
I think it was the lottery, wasn't it?
The lottery.
Yay, no. Dang.
Lottery is a regressive tax on poor people. It just makes things worse. If you don't know what a regressive tax is, Google it. And so they said, we're going to have all this be, and the quote in the paper was manna from heaven. It's going to be manna from heaven, this lottery. I know exactly who said that. Bill Mayberry said that. So it's going to be manna from heaven. Well, Bill was the first one I ever heard use that term. He was talking about liquor store money, ABC money. That didn't pan out either. And then it was lottery money. It was going to be manna from heaven for poor people. That didn't pan out either. Why does lottery money not ever get to schools per pupil? Think about it for a minute now. So Alex goes over and gets him a few scratchers, and he spends $10 on them scratchers. What percent of that $10 goes back to pay out winners? About 40%, isn't it? Something like that. And then maybe more than that. And then you got to pay the lottery company and that idiot that wears that stupid suit that advertises first Monday or Tuesday for the lottery on TV every time I walk by in one zone. That nitwit that's advertising for the lottery. And so by the end, there's just only about 10% of the money is all that's left. And it goes to the opportunity scholarships. And most of those are at the community college or at the four-year college level. And you say, well, they do get some money for schools. They built that cafeteria for that stupid man up in Surrey County because he couldn't figure out how to do a multiple lunch shifts so that all 300 kids could eat lunch at the same time. But that's capital. No money from the lottery ever gets to the per pupil line to help kids in school. Zero. So that was a fallacy. And so the Leandro case has continued on all these years. And West Ed came along and we got a new judge. But eventually the judge ordered the General Assembly to give $2 billion to low wealth districts. $2 billion, that's with a B. And that, but now they're fighting it. Their first offer is like 700 million, about a third of what the court said they had to give. And they've got it earmarked as pork barrel to help their friends rather than low wealth places. I mean, it's going to fall into the same category as the lunchroom up in Surrey. Didn't need it. Wasn't a low wealth place and didn't need it. And it didn't go to helping kids learn anyway. It's just stupid people who couldn't schedule a school. And so that's still being fought, I mean, literally in court today, whether the General Assembly will give the poor schools $2 billion. They're refusing and finding every excuse in the world to do that. But in the end, the notion here is you could do something locally with money to move a little bit here or there, but it would have to be approved and in the budget from the county commissioners. The chances of that happening are slim, but you certainly couldn't do it without their approval up front. You couldn't just, as the superintendent, say, we're going to move some money around. And we can't move federal, we can't move state. The only way we could potentially move, we couldn't move money locally, but we could get some extra money maybe to give to them, but it would have to be in the budget. Now, does the school board approve the budget? Yes, the superintendent builds the budget, school board approves it. Problem with that is, can the school board fund it? That's not a rhetorical question. When the school board passes this summer, passes the Gaston County Schools budget, can they fund that budget? Yes or no?
The school board alone cannot fund it. They still.
They
gonna need
can't, they can't fund it at all.
to- Mhm.
They can't fund it at all. Why? They can't, but they haven't got two nickels to rub together. Why? All right. School boards in North Carolina are unempowered. What does that mean? School boards in North Carolina, in the 100 county systems and the 14 city systems, they're all unempowered. What does that mean? It means they cannot levy tax. If you can't levy tax, can you can you fund anything if you can't levy taxes? That would be no. In those 100 counties, who has the taxing authority? Somebody, anybody. Who has taxing authority in Gaston County? That'd be the county commissioners.
Yeah.
So when the school board this summer passes their budget, they can't just start collecting the money. What do they then have to do? After they pass their budget, who do they have to submit it to? Who does Gaston County Schools? Dr. Booker puts the budget together. He takes it to the school board. They get yammering y'all about it, you know, say dumb things and a smart thing every now and then. But in the end, they vote, you know, they might move the money around a little bit, but they vote, this is our budget. But then who do they have to take it to? Hat in hand and say, please fund this. County commissioners. Are the county commissioners obligated to fund it? No. What if they don't like something in it? They can do one of two things. They can say, take this out or fix this, or they can say, no, try again.
Dr. Lamb, I'm laughing again because the Lincoln County Commissioner was just charged with the DWI. Right.
Yeah, I saw his picture. He was a good looking fellow.
He's something else.
Yeah. As my dad told me a long time ago, you don't see a lot of fellows in suit and tie in the drunk tank. They don't usually look that good. And that was the epitome of him. Boy, he looked rough.
He looked rough on a good day.
Looked like he might have fallen off something that was moving. The way he looked, I saw that. But yeah, the county commissioners have to fund the school budget. How are they elected? You know, I'm
By the people.
You had a government class somewhere along the way. How are county commissioners elected? Is it partisan or nonpartisan elections?
Well, they have to be partisan, right? I mean, it's election.
It has to be partisan, but part of that partisan isn't it by district now? Isn't it by district? There's some district seats, and then some counties are large enough, they have some at-large seats as well. But all right, so, you know, let's say Wood's on it's on the western end of Lincoln County. He's out there somewhere near Wayno's. You know, that.
Don't tell me you know where Wayne is. It's Silver Bullet.
Yeah, Wayno's Silver Bullet. I got shot at one time at Wayno's, so yeah,
Probably me.
I know exactly where Wayno's is. Now I live at the other end of well, actually, I live in Mecklenburg at Lake Norman, but I live on the other end of the county. Let's say I live in Denver, and he lives over at Wayno's, Little Vegas, over at the Silver Bullet. Where I theoretically again, where I live on my end is economically light years away from where Wood would live at the other end of the county. How and it would make sense that the county commissioner that represented his end of the county would want more for that end because they're economically disadvantaged. However, the county commission member from the Denver, end of the county, he's got the answer to his constituents as well. And what's the chances of him getting reelected if he went along with a budget that took money from the parents of the kids who vote on the on the eastern end and gave it to the western end, even though they may need it. And so because we have district races, very rarely will you see a county that says, we're going to give, a county commission that says, bring us a budget that gives certain schools more than other schools of the county's money that we taxed and are giving to you. What do they pretty much want to see in a budget? That everybody gets pretty much the same so that they don't get killed at election time. And so while theoretically you could give a little more money to some of the higher need places, if it appears that, or if it does, if you do, or if it appears that you took it from somebody else, their constituents will not be happy. So right before the pandemic, Chapel Hill Carborough School District, the superintendent there said, I'm going to try to do something for the Carborough kids. Chapel Hill kids are wealthy. It's the same thing. The eastern end of the county where Chapel Hill is very wealthy. It's poor and minority on the Carborough side. We're going to try to get some additional support. And they said, no, you can't do that. The county commissioners won't fund it. The school board won't pass a budget like that because they know the commissioners will just make them mad. We're not going to do it. And so in North Carolina law, a superintendent can spend up to $90,000 without board approval. It's one time. But the superintendent in Chapel Hill Carborough, she said, I'm going to interpret that differently. So she went out and contracted with a private company to provide extra teachers and support to the Carborough side. She was smart enough to do it with a private company because she couldn't have hired them because they would have been on a continuing payroll. This is, one time. And so they sent a bill for $1 million and she had them to divide it up into 12 different invoices. So it came in right under $90,000. But you can only do that one time. And so as soon as it was found out, they fired the finance officer and eventually, after a quick leave, they let her resign and leave right quick. But the whole notion there was it's highly politically sensitive on both sides. You can't be moving money around willy-nilly. So I've kind of let the cat out of the bag here, but I really want you to dig into the Leandro case and West Ed and what's going on more recently. Is the superintendent's plan legal? Can he give different schools in his districts different amounts of money based on need without him having a special appropriation to do that? Can he take money from Peter and give it to Paul? Can he take from the rich and give to the poor? Can he take from the parents of Denver and give it to the ones over at Wayno's Little Vegas over on the other end of Lincoln County? That would be no. Now, this is a case of, we did the ethical concern on our first case study, and we found that the teacher was lacking in all ethical areas. What about the superintendent? Is he lacking ethical concern here? He's doing some unethical. Pardon?
He's just breaking the law. I mean,
he's breaking the law. I mean, he has good intentions, but he's breaking the law. And I would also say that there's some ethical issues with that as well. But what we can't get bound up is saying, well, he's breaking the law for the right reasons. It's better to ask forgiveness than permission. Those two things are not true. Those two things are not true. There is no breaking the law for the right reason. Your heart's in the right place. And when it comes to the law, asking for forgiveness rather than permission, that's not a thing either. And although we might agree that those kids need more, it's not legal nor ethical to give them more. And I don't care how good, how good a reason he had. It's not legal or ethical. I need for you to map that Leandro case, look at West Ed decisions, dig into that. And if you do, you'll get a better idea of funding and why there are inequities in North Carolina, why there's inequities in your own district. My final story on that, and I've got my eye on our time, I'm only about 3 minutes over so far, so we're doing well. When I was in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, we had 3 high schools that weren't doing well. And so the board, said, we'd like to start this high school challenge. It was Garinger, West Meck, West Charlotte. We're going to get them some extra support, $6 million. And the county commissioners passed it, and they got it. And then, of course, a particular party, a group called the Gang of Four, ran as a little group to get on the county commissioners. And they spent a fortune on TV and print ads in Mecklenburg, Charlotte, spending $6 million to give $6 million to these schools. And of course, offended the sensibilities of everybody in the county and all the people, who that as if $6 million were all the money in the world. And the folks who were handling that piece of it didn't have the good political sense to come out and say, yeah, $6 million. But do you realize what percentage of the budget that is? Somebody got a calculator handy? Somebody do this math. 6 million divided by 1.6 billion. I'll give you the answer, right? Wood.
Mine wouldn't even let me do it, but yeah, it's basically like not even.
It's 1/10 of 1%.
Right. Yeah, it's nothing.
Of the 1/10 of 1% of the budget was going to this program, and this group acted. The Gang of Four acted, and they all got elected and stopped it immediately. And of course, they were single issue, but they acted like $6 million was actually real money. In a budget of $1.6 billion, it was less than 1/10 of 1%. It was basically, the money you find in your ashtray. It wasn't even front pocket money. It was just change, like gets caught in the cuff of your pants. That's what that $6 million represented. And they made that out to be the most money that they'd ever seen in the world, $6 million. But of course, it was, they were intentionally misreading and misleading the public. They didn't frame it as this is just a small amount, a one time to try to do something for these schools. And as soon as they got voted in and stopped it, that's when Judge Manning said what's going on in Charlotte is akin to genocide. And really punished Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools for that. But it wasn't the school system who did that. It was 4 county commissioner people who wanted to be on the county commissioner, and they used that as their campaign. And completely misled a generally uninformed and stupid public. Don't be part of that public that doesn't understand how school funding works. $6 million was no money at all. But that's what we're talking about. You can make these issues so sensitive. The deal in Chapel Hill, Carterboro was real simple. A recently retired principal from the Chapel Hill side's granddaughter was going to school over there, and she acted as if they were, that her granddaughter wasn't even going to have a book or a seat or chair. They were going to make them have school out in the field. They give so much over to the other side. That's how she characterized it. There's a reason why people who have stuff have stuff. They're not big into sharing with other folks. And that's something that you'll have to understand. And you're thinking, how in the world could you begrudge these kids something over here that are so distant? Well, they can. Trust me, they can. And so you need to understand how funding works, but you need to understand the Leandro case, in that you'll learn so much by reading through and the West Ed decision. You'll learn so much about equity and funding, where money comes from, how money can be spent. the restrictions on spending and moving money. You'll get a lot of big picture ideas, and it will become, but part of what will come in focus for you, I hope, is you'll understand, this is why things are like they are. It's not incidental or accidental that things are this way. We have rules and structures in place that make them this way. That's just sad but true. But you will learn a lot from the Leandro case. Questions you have for me on the Leandro case so far in terms of what you're supposed to do? I've given you the answer on this, but I want you to dig. I want you to dig into the Leandro case. All right, let's talk about, let's see, let me go through my checklist here. We've done everything that we're supposed to do, and now we're up to discipline. Those of you, everybody who's turned in your task 1, you've done a really good job on the OMA. I'm very pleased. And so do a good job on task 2 and keep moving. All right, let's talk about discipline this week. You have federal law, you have state law, you have local board policy. All right, so in North Carolina, you have the General Assembly. They are the legislative, the lawmaking body in North Carolina. You have in Gaston County a school board. All right. So what does the central office do in Gaston County? Who actually sets policy for Gaston County schools? The superintendent and the central office, or the school board? Who sets policy?
School board sets the policy.
School board sets policy. What's the superintendent and his staff, the central office, what's their job?
Execute that policy.
Interpret and execute that policy. That is exactly right. All right, so everybody's got that? What does DPI do? What does the Department of Public Instruction do what do they do for the General Assembly? They interpret and execute the policies and laws of the General Assembly and the State Board of Education. That's what DPI does. They do interpretation and enforcement. They set and write those things. So, State Department of Public Instruction has done you a major service, They have created a document that has federal law in it, because remember, since 2014, our data collection system in North Carolina includes Office of Civil Rights. That's federal. So they've taken all your federal stuff, and they've taken all of your policies from the State Board of Education, and taken all your laws from the General Assembly and put it in one handy dandy guide for you. Just like your local Board of Education has put everything in a handy dandy guide for you called the Code of Conduct for Gaston County Schools. Well, it is law that Gaston County Schools has to do that, but they have to set their code of conduct based on that disciplinary data manual that comes out from DPI. So that's the original piece of law. When we get to discipline and due process, the original piece of law, the original document is that disciplinary data manual. So let's go to that. And there it is. This has everything that you need to know up to what you do with kids. Let me say that again. Up to what you do with them. It tells us all the rules, all the laws, what must be reported in Power School, what must be reported to law enforcement. It explains persistently dangerous schools and what will happen to you if you have too many of those persistently. It defines what they are and what the ratio is. It has scenarios. It defines what the infractions are. It defines what the acts of crime and the acts of violence are. It talks about alternative school. It has everything in there. And then the local picks up with, what are we going to do with these kids who do these things? The state does not prescribe, if you fight, you get 3 days OSS. That's in your local Gaston County adopted code of conduct. But this is the first piece that sets everything that everything else works off of. Now, the heart of this notion is incidents. Don't be that dumb person who says things to the person at the central office in charge of this, like, well, I didn't report that because we didn't suspend that kid. Again, that's like, you know, if Marcia shoots me and leaves town, does that mean I'm not dead if we don't catch her or punish her? No, that has nothing to do with whether she shot me or not. She shot me as an incident. We report incidents in power school, not outcomes. We have to tell them what we did, but we can't say we didn't report this thing that happened at our campus because we didn't suspend the kid. There are all kind of action types from conference to out of school suspension. That has to be reported, but we report what happened. And let me say this part, and I'm going to stop my share, and I'll come right back. There is no major, there is no minor. Do not ever be that person that uses either of those terms when talking about discipline or due process or disciplinary reporting. The state does not recognize that language. Let me say that again. The state does not recognize that language. And if you use that language, what you are saying is I am intentionally underreporting and breaking state law in my reporting. There is no major, there is no minor. I've had people say, well, we only put the major stuff in there. We don't put the minor stuff. There is no major, there is no minor. What you might as well say, I'm guilty of underreporting or misreporting or non-reporting. I want to give up my job in my house. It's become quite common that in the early years of this, people just wouldn't tell what happened. And then it got to be where police reports were being compared to what incident reporting, and we could see that schools weren't telling the truth. And so then they went to underreporting, like, one middle school, everything that happened on the bus was bus misbehavior. That is not true. If Paris reaches over and slaps me on the bus, that's an assault. That is not bus misbehavior. Bus misbehavior is if you're jumping seats or standing up. We had a middle school that had 11 rapes, 11, and reported them all as bus misbehavior. And when it got to the news media and the parents rose up and got a community, got an advocate behind them and did all this stuff, and we went to the principal and said, why didn't you report this stuff? And he said, I did. Well, show us where you reported it. Well, right here, bus misbehavior. If a rape occurs on a bus, that's not bus misbehavior, that's a rape. This notion of underreporting, or I only reported if it was major, or I won't report it if it's minor, or I have buyer's remorse. I get home and my blood pressure's gone down and I've got the blood off of me, and my eyes, I've got some ice on it, and I don't report that as a fight that I had to break up. And the next day I go in, well, maybe that was just aggressive behavior. Put things in when you're supposed to, categorize them correctly according to this manual as it tells you to. It has several scenarios, it has definitions. So let's start working through it quickly here. Let me share my screen. And it says very clearly here, all the people that, state board and all the legislature, Department of Public Instruction. So you'll see references in here to state board policy. You'll see references in here to Office of Civil Rights, federal. You'll see references in here to state law. And so, and it tells you, it allows DPI to fulfill its data reporting obligations on crime and violence, suspension, expulsion, and alternative placements. It tells you all those things. We organize data reporting around incidents, not outcomes or actions. Let me say that for the 17th time. We report incidents, not outcomes or actions. That is the law. See, here's North Carolina, again, general statutes. So here are the things that are listed by state definition as would make you a persistently dangerous school. Remember back to 1991 and No Child Left Behind, it said two things. Students don't have to go to low performing schools. They don't have to go to persistently dangerous schools. The state defines persistently dangerous as more than 0.5% of these things on the screen right now occurring in a school year. Homicide, assault resulting in serious bodily injury, assault involving use of weapon, rape, sexual offense, sexual assault, kidnapping, robbery with a dangerous weapon, and taking indecent liberty with a minor. Those things are acts of violence. They count against your persistently dangerous total. You get 1 for every 200 kids, 5 for every 1,000, 0.5 of 1%, 0.5. If you have more than that over a 2-year period, it says right there, you'll be declared persistently dangerous. What happens if your school is prepared persistently dangerous and you're a school administrator? What happens to you? Somebody, anybody? Do what?
Lose your house.
You hope that you get to go home. More than likely, you're going to lose your house. You're definitely going to lose your job. Definitely going to lose your job. That's just the way it works. Now, we're going to talk in a few minutes about how to try to keep these things from happening. You say, Dale, these are random things. How can I keep them from happening? Well, we're going to talk about that. But remember, it's 5 per 1,000 students. That would be 1 for 200 or 0.5%. These things count against you. You've got to report them. Now, the solution is not to say, we just won't tell anybody, or we'll count it as something less. So I get a call, we're being sued, CMS, I get a call, always when we're getting sued. So I get a call, we're getting sued. What are we getting sued about today? Well, this afternoon, this morning. We get 3 or 4 lawsuits a day. What are we getting sued about this morning? Well, we have a BMT, Behavior Management Technician or modification, whatever BMT stands for. Teacher assistants, basically, who work over at Metro, over at Morgan School, public separate for, for behavior disabled kids. He's suing us over, we denied his claim for workman's compensation. Well, why did we deny his claim? Well, the principal reported in Power School that he was assaulted without injury. And he claims that he had serious body injury and he's got these workman's comp and he's got about $200,000 worth of medical bills where they've tried to attach his arm, reattach his arm. His arm basically got torn off. And so I hot-footed it over to see the principal over at Morgan, and she said, well, that would have counted against us. And, I said, what do you mean? Well, it would have counted against our numbers and we'd made persistently dangerous. I said, but because you said that he was without injury, they've denied his workman comp claim. He's got no insurance. Well, he'll eventually get the use of his arm back, maybe. How can you say that's not a serious incident if he's had to have 11 surgeries? And her response was because it'll count against us. I mean, that's how stupid people are about hiding these things and trying to protect themselves, underreporting, counting a rape on a bus as bus misbehavior. That's the kind of stuff that goes on one time until you get caught. And then you lose your house and you may lose your freedom. So you better know the rules. And the solution is not to underreport. The solution is not the Myers Park solution where you threaten the victim if they tell it. That's not the solution either, as you've seen since the principal and now the superintendent's been fired over that whole deal. That's not the deal. And you say, well, Dale, I've got one pulled up right here. This one's from 2017 or 2018. Don't tell me that this is not a thing where a girl reported that she'd been 14-year-old girl claimed a sexual relationship with a teacher facing criminal charge, appeared in court, case Monday, according to public McIntosh, the assistant principal, not only failed to report the student's sexual assault to the Aurora Police Department, but instead that she forced the girl to apologize to the person that sexually assaulted her. I mean, that's exactly what happened at Myers Park. Girl says she was dragged into a bathroom and raped at Myers Park, and they suspended her. We cleaned out the entire administrative team at a high school in Charlotte back in the day. When I said we, I mean me. All the way down to the data manager, who suspended a girl after a civilian, a contract worker, came and reported that a male was raping a female student out at the ball field, and they covered it up and suspended her. They all went home, all the way down to the data manager, the whole bunch. It's not unheard of. It continues today. You've got to put in what happens, folks. You've got to put in what happens. If you don't, it's going to be bad for you. Now, you say, well, Dale, I don't know if I know how to put it in the right way. I can show you this one. This was at one time a confidential document. For those of you who are old enough to know that NCYs became Power School. And so I had this, and it has my name on it here, as you can see. I had this document built by this staff development company, and we trained all of our administrators. And then after that, my folks trained the new ones as we got them, exactly how we wanted everything in it. Exactly. And if you have a question, you give Dale a call. And I don't know that Gaston County has one of these. I can't know because, again, they're confidential documents that show the screens and the things for security reasons. But I suspect Gaston County probably has one of these as well that will help you. But if you've got a question, and it says so right here, if you have a question, there's supposed to be a person in your district, the superintendent or the designee, that will answer questions about these things. That you are to make sure that you comply with all of these rules. Now, again, here's another general statute: to compile annual report, Office of Civil Rights. If you violate the law, you have to tell them zero tolerances. That's a violation. You have to tell them that you did that. Again, here's the federal definition. What must be reported in disciplinary data? Look at this list. Anything. Look at all that stuff. It has to be reported. Nowhere in that does it say major or minor. Anything that a kid gets a referral for in school has to be put into Power School, period. All these things have to be reported. All these things have to be reported to law enforcement. Now, sexual assault, sexual offense, all those things have to be. Sexual harassment is a sexual crime. You better call the law. All of these things, it has all your rules in here. It has scenarios. It has all of your appeals. It has alternative schools, how to, when more than one thing happens, kid brings a gun, but he's also got drugs. It's got all of those things, all those scenarios, reporting behavior examples, reporting assault examples, reporting bullying. Here's the law on bullying and harassing behavior. And here's the part that you better understand when it comes to cyberbullying. So here's the cyberbullying. Here's cyberbullying law, and all the things that you have to comply. This is cyberbullying. It's a very good one. And here again is what the law says right here. It's in the manual there. So here's the deal on cyberbullying, which is our activity for this week. Here's the deal on cyberbullying. The cyberbullying law was not repealed. That's the first lie that I hear administrators tell. Well, that cyberbullying was repealed. It was not. There was one provision, the Twitter war revision. The Twitter war provision was repealed, and all that is if me and Alex get in a Twitter war, or me, or me and Alex and Laura getting a Twitter war, and all of a sudden Alex and Laura turn on me. I can't claim that I've been bullied. Why?
You were a participant before?
That's right. I was a participant before. I can't claim that I've been bullied if I just start losing. But other than that, the cyberbullying law is still on the books. And so the first thing that would have principals say is, well, they repealed that law. No, they didn't. That's not true. And then the second thing that, the chronically stupid will say is, well, I don't know what device they use, or I don't know if they did it from school. Neither one of those matters either. What does the law say? If the educational environment is disrupted, you have to deal with it. Parents coming in and saying, well, he did that when he was at home. I don't care if he was at home. You can't be doing those things. You don't want to
Dr.
have
Lim, I have
to.
a question.
Yes.
I interviewed my assistant principals about that, and one of the things they were saying is, that they can't control what kids post or do at home, and if it doesn't,
Yes, they can. Yeah, they can.
Okay, well, that's
They
what
don't
they told
want
me.
to. What they said to you was, we can't, but what they meant was, we don't want to.
Well, the way they put it to me, is why I'm trying to.
Yeah, I get it,
Rip.
Alex. I don't
Yes.
mean to be rude.
No, you're fine. I just wanted to make sure I understood, because they said that, plus they said, as long as it doesn't affect like you're saying, the overall
Yeah,
function of the
yeah.
school day of the school.
That's a great point, Alex. You don't go hunting things, but when they come to you and cause it's affected at the school, what they did at home does count. Now, we don't monitor their accounts home or whatever until what happens. Alex is exactly right. When a kid shows up to school on Monday and another kid standing there on the bus lot and punches him in the face, and we got a riot on the bus lot, and it come to find out that he was writing bad, then yes, we have to do that. Now, we're not the Twitter police or the Facebook police or the IM or whatever. But when they bring it to school and it causes a problem at school, a disruption at school, then yes, we have the duty to handle it, and we have the responsibility to handle it, and we have the authority under the law to handle it. That is correct. When it disrupts our environment, that's what that bullying law says. We have to do that. We can't just throw up our hands and say, oh, it's not our problem. Well, yeah, it is. If they bring it to school, we got to deal with it. And it's not it's not a choice if we want to or not. We have bullying law from 2009 says if they bring it to school, we deal with it. Because that was always the cop out for years is well, that was from the mall on the weekend, or that was from, the neighborhood, no.
Yeah, I know from experience in the middle school, one of the things that we get a lot of are kids who make like social media web pages, like Instagram accounts,
Yep.
Twitter accounts, where they post pictures of teachers, students, and say vulgar things about them, or
Yep.
we see that all the time
Yep.
at Holbrook.
Yeah. So here, thank you for that.
That happens at Highland actually quite a bit too. That's one of their favorite things to do.
Yeah, and so why does the law say right here that you can't build that? A fake profile or a website, you can't do that. See here, and that's what it's talking about. You can't do those things. All these things that happen here, you can't do these things. But it also, under the School Violence Prevention Act, what we generally refer to as the Bullying Act of 2009, it says you will deal with this if it creates a hostile or interfering with the parent's student performance. Now, again, here in the handbook, the same thing. I just pulled it out for you separately right here, where you can go back and read it. And it tells you that bullying may be written, electronic, or verbal. Again, cyberbullying. And it tells you what you have to do here when that happens. Now, here's one of those unfortunate things that we have to discuss. the awareness of this duty and responsibility on school administrators to handle this cyberbullying came about on suicide awareness. We had, I want to say the year before the pandemic? Everything is kind of like the Great Depression or whatever. The pandemic has become like, a reference point in time. I want to say 2018 or 19, we had what I consider to be a rash of teen suicides across America based on cyberbullying.
Yeah.
And the administrators in, I want to say Vermont, somewhere in the Northeast, the far Northeast, were found liable that they had not acted. A student was being bullied and they had not acted, and the girl killed herself. But she had reported that she was suicidal and they had not stopped it, had not done anything. I don't think that was in Vermont. I would have to pull that up, but I have to sleep a little bit. This stuff makes me not want to sleep, folks. I'll just tell you, it gets to you. It really does. But we had a number of suicides that year, and I don't want to guesstimate, but I remember specifically there was one about every 2 or 3 months, and it heightened around, and schools were asked to make a commitment to stopping this stuff. That, if students are coming to you and telling you, I'm being bullied, I feel like I could kill myself. If kids are fighting, if you have all these issues, you better deal with it. I mean, if you don't, it's just going to eat you up, and it only gets worse. It's never one of those things if you just leave it alone. Remember when you were a kid, you had a scab and your mama told you to quit picking at it and it'd get better? Well, this isn't one of those things. If you just leave it alone and don't bother it, it won't get better. It'll get worse. It will get worse, unfortunately. And this is kind of the cottage industry in our business now, is bullying, cyberbullying, internet, online stuff. Alex's assistant principals are exactly right. You don't go looking for it, but when they bring it to you, you got to deal with it. I've told you the story at Bailey Middle School. The next door is Huff High School. Kid was walking around there, all these boys gathered around seeing the phone AP that I had trained. When boys are gathered around a phone, something's not good. Went over and got the phone, got the police involved so they could subpoena, and found out that there was an 18-year-old boy that was blackmailing these little middle school girls who would send him pictures of inappropriate pictures, and then he was blackmailing them into having sex with them, indecent liberties with minor. They were 11, 12, 13 years old, and he was 18. Yeah. But now if he just said, well, that phone's not my business, or I don't have subpoena power or whatever, but he got it to the policeman. All he had to have was reasonable suspicion. And he took the phone. They were able to get the records, and it was a really, really, really bad deal. It was a scandal in the community. But that's what kind of things that we're talking about here. Kids killing themselves, fighting, all this other stuff going on over these things. If it can get a hold of your school and take it over. It can take your school over. It can just ruin the culture of your school. And I'm going to show you in a few minutes something. And you're going to say, well, that's why Dale was pointing this out. He's going to try to tell us how smart he is. Well, maybe, but that's later on tonight in a few more minutes. So let me share my screen and go back. Again, it has all these things that you have to do. I'll kind of skip forward here. It categorizes all of the infractions. Here they are. Here are all of your infractions. You have to report them. You have to report where it happened so that you can run your reports to see where your hot spots are, where you can get extra supervision. Power School will allow you to do that. So when you enter your data in the instance, say it's fighting, me and Charlene were fighting, we enter that in. We have to tell where it happened. We have to tell if it was a student or it can be somebody else, and then we have to categorize it, as to what it was. And then here we go. Now, if it has a PD prefix, what does that mean? When we select this one as our, that's that persistently dangerous. No, that's PD. You got to call the police, yes, but it's going to count on your calculation. Now, that doesn't mean skip over it and pick something else. That's not what it means. It means if what happens fits that definition, then that's what you have to report. But know that you got to call the law, and it's going to count on that persistently dangerous calculation. Now, RO means call the law. That's reportable offense. It's not going to count against your total, but you got to call the law anyway. And then UB, unacceptable behavior. Now, there's 4 anomalies here. Don't make this mistake. There are 4 UBs you got to call the law anyway. Because why do they have behind them here as their suffix?
General statute.
Threat. It's got a general statute, which means that is a violation of the law.
Yeah, violation of law.
That's what that means. So if it's a violation of the law, what do you have to do? You have to call the law. So you have communicating threats, alcohol possession, that's an RO. UB, afraid, disorderly, and there's another one, burning of a building. Those, although they start out, their prefix is UB, don't ignore the suffix, which says you have to call the police. Disorderly conduct, affray. Who knows what an affray is? AFFRAY.
Fight or brawl?
It's a
It's a
fight
fight.
or a brawl in a public location like the cafeteria or the auditorium. That is correct. That's more than 2 students involved. That's an affray. That's actually against the law. You're supposed to tell the police. Can't have a dozen kids fighting in the lunchroom and just say, well, that's just a fight. No, that's an affray. You got to get the police involved. So here are all the different infractions. Now here are, gosh, there's a bunch of them in there. Here are your consequence types or your actions. Again, we report incidents, not actions. Doesn't matter. We could just give them a conference, but we still have to report it. What we did to the kid as a result of what he did has nothing to do with whether we report or not. We report what happened. And we can't say, well, I don't want to select that one. That one's going to hurt me because it's got a PD prefix. I'm going to pick something else. No. Right here, here they are. If it fits these definitions, then this is what you have to call it. And it tells you exactly. Now, I'm going to tell you, and I will say this up front, I am one of my doctoral students is a police captain in Gaston County. I won't use his name to protect the innocent here, but he is one of my doctoral students and a friend of mine. And I had great relationship with all my resource officers. I have the police department when I supervise them. I don't have, there's no but coming. I have a lot of respect for what those folks do. I don't desire to be one of them, but I have a lot of respect for them. But please understand, if you cross them, they will throw you under the bus. You got to know that. In dealing, you must respect and honor and do the things that you're supposed to do like you would anybody else in the world. But I'm going to tell you, if you cross the policeman at your building or your school resource officer or the one, if you cross them, they will throw you under the bus and then see if they can back it up and run over you again. You better know that about them. So what that means is, if you're supposed to call them and involve them in investigation and you don't because you're trying to handle it in-house, when that comes to light, they'll tell the media on you. They will not carry your weight. They will not take the beating that you will not give that to them. They will not suffer in silence and let the public beat them up over your stupidity or illegality or incompetence. They will tell the public, and they'll tell them by name that you did this. So you better know that. In dealing with them. So that's part of this too, is You got to hold up your end of the bargain. If you're supposed to tell police, you better tell police. If it says report it to them, and you better not be doing investigations that you're not qualified to do. Are school administrators qualified to conduct investigations of a sexual nature? That would be no, absolutely not. As soon as you have somebody says, I've been sexually harassed, you better call the police. Well, sexual harassment is a sexual crime, and most of the time, as soon as if there's any physical contact, you're done. You need to get police involved. I would involve them from the very beginning. So that leads to the case at North Mecklenburg. They have a veteran principal who's just gotten there. He's done a stint in the central office, and they want him to come out and do an interim. He's not happy, but he goes out to do an interim. And they've got a veteran AP team, and a 16-year-old girl, an exceptional student in one of the behavioral units, self-contained, comes in and reports that her mother comes in and reports that she's been raped, that she's pregnant, and she's 16. And so the assistant principal consults with the principal, and without consulting with the Huntersville Police Department. Now, understand North Mecklenburg, their bottom driveway is Hambright Road, and Hambright is the dividing line between Charlotte and Huntersville in Mecklenburg County. So they are served not by CMPD, but by Huntersville Police. And those town units, they report, and it comes out in the newspaper every week. They don't do that in Charlotte. And so anything that happens becomes public. And so it's kind of a public relations nightmare if you're in one of the smaller towns. And so they pretty much had a notion here, the principal that was doing the interim, he'd been principal at the top two high schools in the district where you don't ever tell anything. Like Wobegon, where everybody's, good looking and above average. And they're all gifted. If you don't believe it, just ask their mamas. And that had been his experience. And he knew that if you said anything, that it would show up in the Lake Norman paper or the Huntersville Herald. And so they did not tell that the police, the Huntersville, the SRO, there was actually two there, did not tell them that the mother had come in and made the report. Well, one of the APs did the investigation and found that it was consensual. And so no crime had occurred, no harm, no foul, going about your business. Well, my mother, she went to the news media and screamed and yelled and jumped up and down. And of course, everybody then immediately turned and looked at the Huntersville Police Department. And they came on TV and said, this is on the school administration, and called them by name. By the time that we got wind of this, they'd already done an investigation and contaminated any evidence that might have been available. We're quite certain a crime occurred, but we can't take any action. Ooh. That's two more folks got to go home. I hope they got to keep that home. Of course, they were old enough. Hopefully they didn't lose it, but two more folks had to go home. Can't survive stuff like that when they say we're quite certain a crime has been committed. Now, why did the police say they were quite certain a crime had been committed, even though they didn't collect any evidence? Well, they could see that the girl was pregnant. That was their first clue.
Was she underage?
No, she was 16. But she could not consent because nobody bothered to read the law. Let's read the law. Right. In North Carolina, you have to be mentally capable of offering consent at 16. If you're a self-contained EC, can you consent to sex at any age if you're in a self-contained unit? You cannot. And see, that's what Mom was trying to explain to all of them, that her daughter, she might have been 16 chronologically, but she was about 6 mentally. And it says very clearly right here, folks, mentally incapacitated, mentally disabled, or mentally incapacitated. And the person who knows should reasonably know. So the point is mentally disabled. If you're in a self-contained unit, there is also, and here's where it's even better. If they're mentally incapacitated, or let me go back. Let me get my language right here. Mentally disabled. All right. Mentally incapacitated means that they're in a self-contained EC group. Let's talk about mentally disabled for a minute. What if you have a kid who's regular ed or inclusion model that's learning disabled, but their IQ is less than 80? Can they consent? What do you think? I'd say no. I'd sure hate to go to court with somebody who's just learning disabled, that's mainstreamed or an inclusion that's out in the world. Not, you're gonna lose if they're self-contained. That's just, tomorrow's gonna be Thursday. If they're self-contained, you're gonna lose. You go to court. It's just as sure as tomorrow's Thursday. That's what I'm telling you. The gray area there is, what about your LD kids? If their IQ's below 80, you're going to lose them, I believe. That was my experience at CMS. We were, come on 90. I hate to say that, so ugly. We were hoping their IQ was 90. Otherwise, we were going to get hosed. But yeah, I'd say if it's below 80, that ain't great. I don't mean to be flippant about this. This is a serious matter. But if their IQ's below 80 and they're just learning disabled, they can't consent. And so, but the appropriate thing would have been for the longtime AP to know the law, to know that somebody in a unit can't consent if they're in a self-contained unit at any age, and that she should have, first thing that she should have done was got the resource officer. Officer Jones was there. There was 2 at the time there. They were still big enough. They had to have 2 SROs at North Met because they had the trailer city there as well. I don't know if y'all remember that. One time, North Met had about 3,500 students. They had a trailer city that was bigger than most high schools in the state that were just mobile units. They had 80 mobile units. That's 80. They had 80 mobile units. And they had to have a whole nother staff, a whole nother security, a whole nother resource officer just for the trailer city. They had 2 there. How do you not find one of them to tell them that this parent has come and made this report? But that's the notion here. This is real life stuff. You better read this manual. You better read this manual. It will tell you everything you need to know. And then when you read that, then this manual at that time, you got to read the state manual. But then when you do that, I can close that. This one will make sense to you. This is the Gaston County one, and it's got all the things. It's got the code of conduct. It's got the levels. It's got what you can do to them so that you won't be arbitrary or capricious. If you do this, this is the range. It has due process, what you're supposed to get. It has all these things in here, and it's online. You can pull it up. But between these two documents, the state on how to report it, what has to be reported, and this in terms of what due process, what your parameters are. And so here's all of those things, but these will be your friend when you become an assistant principal, because you will have to do discipline. You just will. You'll have to do it, because that's part of the rite of passage is that you've got to do that. I can't tell you enough times, you better pursue cyberbullying if it causes a problem at your campus. You don't go out and start just randomly going through people's Twitter accounts, but when they bring it to your doorstep, you got to handle it. The law says you have to. And cyberbullying was not repeated, just the Twitter war deal was. Make sure you understand that. So I've got a really good slideshow. I mean, somebody else did it on bullying and what you can do to address it. It's got some good information in there. You know, bullying is a big part of your problems in school. So, all right. So in 2011, just after I retired, I was the keynote. I probably told you this at the big Healthful Living Conference, DPI conference at Curry in Greensboro, the old Four Seasons. And so this is what I put together. I had a criminologist that worked with me, and we put this together. And so now again, we started this in 2010, and this was published in 2011. Now let's see how clairvoyant Dale is. What did I identify as the things that were causing the most problems with these acts of campus crime and violence, and things that for the next decade were going to be the big issues? Let's see what I picked. How close was I? Gang activity, cyberbullying, bullying, sexting, you know, that stuff on the phone, and sexual harassment. It was pretty close. But the notion here, and I've got all the information, the federal guidelines, I've got No Child Left Behind, persistently dangerous, all those things, again, all that stuff. But the notion here is, you know, we talk about violence prevention, gang awareness, identifying gangs, all these kinds of things. Title IX, sexual stuff, all that. It's pretty good. It's a pretty good deal. It's fairly well received at the conference. But the notion here is this, not how smart I am. Y'all already figured out that ain't the case. But the notion here is, how do you prevent the big stuff? How do you prevent the big stuff from happening? You're going to get bad things are going to happen to you if you have too many of the big things to happen. How do you keep the big things from happening? Well, stop the little things. It's called antecedent behaviors. The little things lead to the big things. If you allow kids to perpetuate and act like they're in gangs, even if it's at the fantasy level, you'll eventually see drugs and weapons and assaults. You just will. If you allow kids to hold hands and kiss in inappropriate state of affection, eventually you'll have rape, sexual assaults, sexual offense, indecent liberties. You'll have the whole deal. You know, if you allow kids to use cell phones freely and don't take action, you will have sexting, you'll have inappropriate behaviors, you'll have cyberbullying, you'll have the whole deal. If you don't report sexual harassment to police and get them involved in sexual harassment and sexual offenses, it will become bigger. It will become the big four: rape, sexual offense, sexual assaults, indecent liberty. The little things ignored become the big things. The school that had 11 rapes on the school bus, I was there doing the pre-audit, and I took the criminologist, and we've been working with them trying to, you know, their data was bad, and that's why it was hiding the rapes, because they'd already been persistently dangerous for the year before, and it was getting worse. And I walked into that middle school. We were there less than an hour, and I said, I've never seen anything like this in my life. This is like an episode of Love Island. I mean, you know, they needed to get a room. It was just awful. And I was like, we've never seen anything like this. And that's when, you know, we didn't know yet, but we knew it was coming. And that's when we found out there had been 11 confirmed cases of rape on the school bus. It got really ugly at that school out in the university area. Of course, we had to change administration. You know, that principal had to go quietly into the night. He was out of the business overnight. But you know, if you don't have control, they'll either be fighting or loving or both, and it won't go well for you. The little things will become the big things, and you will lose your job. The notion of allowing students at a persistently dangerous school to choose another school in the district, that's outmoded. We tried that a couple of times in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, and it was a disaster both times. So after that, the only other option you have is to reconstitute the school. Administrative team gets dismissed and teachers all have to reapply for their jobs. That's the way it goes. So you say, but Dale, you're telling on yourself. Yeah, but if you don't tell on yourself, it's going to be criminal. And then you may lose your liberty as well. If you don't, you're required by law to do these things. If you intentionally don't, or underreport, or manipulate, or take them out, that's criminal. You may end up losing your liberty along with your house. And so you should know what due process is. We take students are allowed to give their statement. We take written statements. We have to present them with the charges. We have to have proof. We have to go through all 9 stages if we're going to do something as crazy as put a kid out for the year. But that state manual that we spent time with tonight and that Gaston County Code of Conduct tells us what kids are supposed to get. That's the substance. What you give them is the procedure. And that's what is always in question. Did you do the things that you were supposed to do to be able to discipline these kids and to have some sort of order in your building? Simply underreporting or non-reporting or hiding or claiming that you don't have to report incidents if you didn't suspend or that they were minor. All of those things are not. None of those things are true. And they tell us pretty quickly that your intent is to not follow the law, and the district just can't support you in that. Just can't. They may not be happy with the negative publicity, just like the assistant principal that was having sex with the middle school kid not long ago, who was an up and comer, was already tapped to be a principal the next year. But you have to live through it. The principal, she took her, that they waited till 5 o'clock on Friday to announce it, that she'd been arrested. They, to try to, stay off the media cycle and, let it die down some over the weekend. But of course they were waiting with long knives on Monday morning. But, that's better than trying to cover it up or hide it. You can't survive that. It's the cover up that gets you, folks. Questions you have for me? I gotta let y'all need to ask more questions. You need to talk more. So Delby, you just cut us off and interrupt us. Well, that's true too. You got to get in there and fight a little bit. You got to fight a little bit. What questions you have for me? What comments? What are we missing? What have we not covered? What gaps do we have in our learning?
I'm missing what compels somebody to want to cover up a, ripping somebody's arm off or covering up rapes or something like that.
That's a great question. Wood, they both of those places the year before had been persistently dangerous, and they knew that if they were replaced that way again that year, that they were going to lose their job. That's exactly right. That's a great question. I have been to both campuses preparing them for their state audit. At the end of the year, when your data is bad, the next spring we have to file a plan, a school safety plan, but the state comes out and does an audit the following spring. If you don't pass your audit, it don't matter what your data is. If you pass your audit and your data is clean at the end of the year, you're okay. And when they do the audit, they do the exact one, that school inventory that I had y'all do. That's the one that they do. They come out and check all that stuff. And then they check then they sit down and pull all your power school stuff. But they look at all of those things when they come out. And they don't just come out and look at your data. They come out and look at your school from top to bottom. They come out in March. And in about 6 weeks, you get the results. The 1st of May, you get the results. And if you passed, then, and then at the end of the year, when your statisticals are done, if you didn't violate, then you're off. If you go back the next year, you get another year after that. But both of these were in the 2nd year. They were in the data collection year for dismissal. They had already placed persistently dangerous for 1 year. They were in their 2nd year, and they were now taking steps to try to keep their numbers down, except they weren't getting out and supervising doing the right things. They were just cheating. It's easy. Now, you know, for those of you old enough to remember scales back in the old days, now they're all digital. But back in the old days, you know, I could lose weight one or two ways. I could eat better and work out, or I could reach down and turn the wheel on the front of the scale. Which one of those is a guarantee? Turning the wheel on the front of the scale, that's the guarantee. Cheat. And so they were both in a situation where they felt compelled to cheat. But then you have other people, to Wood's point, you have other people at some schools who aren't in that situation, who feel compelled to cheat because it's a bad PR look for their school. Two examples on that, and I'll go to Vance High School because I get a call from DPI, and you know, when DPI calls you, they talk pretty rough to you sometimes. They kind of, we're going to flip the switch. What's happened? Well, we didn't get any data turned in from Vance this month. And so I go up there. I thought it's a technical issue. Doesn't have anything. But no, they've hired one of those new leaders for new schools, one of those people that carried a clipboard for a year and didn't go through any training. And what they said to her is, we want you to get the out of school suspension numbers down. That's what they said. What she heard was, we want you to cheat. We want to guarantee. Instead of making sure teachers are doing their supervision, doing their duty roster in the halls, in the cafeteria, you know, instead of making sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to, she just simply stopped putting data in Power School and just started and made her own suspension form of just bootlegging suspension. Problem with that is attendance. How did we get paid? Through attendance. And so all these kids that were suspended out of school, they were being counted as present because they weren't on the they were not on the absence report. And so we had to rebate a bunch of money to the state, but she had to go home. She was trying to get an AP job, a real AP job. She had, you know, this was an issue where she did not have a degree. She had come through that alternative pathway, what's now called TP3, that's been it's been integrated into Principal Fellow program. But there's an alternative pathway in North Carolina for selected people, just a handful. But, you know, she was trying to make a name for herself quickly. That's what she was doing. So she had to go. She was bootlegging suspensions and didn't understand the financial implications, that it was wrong, it was illegal, but didn't understand the financial implications either. You know, then I had an AP who had about 40 years of service in between being a teacher and an AP. She was at, I think, Old Providence, and she said, I'm not entering any of this stuff in. And I said, well, I'm gonna have to let you go if you don't. I'm retired. I said, well, why won't you enter it in? She said, because these parents would go crazy. They believe that their babies don't never do anything wrong. I said, but you haven't reported anything happened to school in 2 years. Nothing. I've seen 3 or 4 infractions just walking in. Yeah, but we can't tell the parents that. Well, why can't you tell the parents that? Well, they won't like it. Not part of the equation. Not part of the equation. And then I had the principal, you know, we got going to court the next day on an attendance violation, and parents reported, well, the kid's been suspended all this time. You know, we go in to pull the attendance record, you know, no suspensions. We go over to school. Why, you know, was this kid suspended? Yeah, why? Well, we got a new person. It's May. When did this person come? August. They're not new. So what she would do every year is she would move her staff around. So she had a new data person every year, and she would claim that we couldn't enter the data in because we had a new person. You're only new till lunchtime the first day. After that, in the afternoon the first day, that excuse won't fly in court. But seriously, the district, we were taking a parent, we were going to remove the kids from the home and put them in foster care. And the parents said, it's not that we're not sending kids to school, they're suspending this kid. But they were not recording those suspensions. And it came to the point where the district attorney was moving against the parents. Didn't want the kid in school. Kid was tearing the school up, but didn't want to have to deal with the kid. And so that was it. So there's any number of things. None of them are legitimate, though. None of them are legitimate. A lot of young administrators don't want to draw attention or negative PR, or they think their principal or the superintendent's gonna be mad. You know, they'll think we can't handle it, that these bad things, we don't want them to know that anything bad happened at this campus, because they'll think we can't handle it, we won't get promoted. A lot of it is self-enforced, you know, where you think somebody's going, but you know, you get caught underreporting, not reporting, hiding, covering it up, making decisions like, oh, that's minor, we don't report it, or that didn't carry a suspension, so we don't have to tell it, or let's handle that in-house, which means cover up, illegal cover up. That's what in-house means. When somebody says we handle that in-house, that means illegal cover up. That's what that means. I'll just translate that for you. But yeah, this is real life, folks. It's you know, the real consequences on this stuff. Real consequences. I can't tell you how serious this is. And to Alice's point with his APs, you don't have to go hunting it, but if it comes to you, you can't ignore it. You can't just say, not my problem. You just can't. It is your problem. You got to deal with these things. You're better off to deal with them when they're little, antecedent behaviors, and deal with parents, you know, grumbling and complaining that, you know, that you know, my child's perfect, I know they wouldn't do this, that, or the other. You're better off dealing with that than having to go to court or losing your job because it got out of control. That is the dealio. I hope you're learning something this summer. I hope you've learned something the last 2 semesters, but I hope you're learning something this summer for self-preservation. This is the kind of stuff that you know, again, it's about, you know, this is about your job, about not losing your house. So I hope that you're learning something. I'm looking forward to our case next week, you know, the Andrew case with the superintendent's funding. I'm looking for you. I actually have a really good presentation that I'll share with you after next week that one of your colleagues in Gaston County did an excellent job. She kind of did a historical perspective of the Andrew. I'll share that with you, but I hope to get another one from Gaston County as good as hers. Anybody have anything for the good of the group? I'll see you next week.